Today, we're talking about something that can make a massive difference in your financial plan, not just today, but for years and even decades to come. And that is how to ask for and get a raise. Now, I know for many pharmacists, myself included in days gone by, that the thought of walking into your supervisor's office, walking in your boss's office and asking for more money is about as pleasant as getting a cavity filled, which, by the way, why isn't visiting a dentist in 2025 a more pleasant experience? Apologies to any of the dentists that are out there maybe listening. Anyways, I digress. Back to asking for a raise. It's uncomfortable. It's awkward. You might be thinking, what if they say no? What if I ruin the relationship? What if they think that I'm being greedy? But here's the truth. Most people never get a big raise for one simple reason: they never ask. And that ask is not just about more dollars in your paycheck. It's about your confidence in your ability to advocate for the value that you bring. And before we go any farther, let's be honest with ourselves. A 2% bump in salary that keeps pace with inflation, or perhaps doesn't even keep pace with inflation, that is not the same thing as a raise. That's a cost of living adjustment. And so on today's episode, we're going to break down this process into a 5-step playbook with practical examples, real-world negotiation tips, and a few of my favorite strategies from Chris Voss's book, Never Split the Difference. And let's start with step number 1. We've already alluded to it. That is ask for it. Ask for the raise, right? You actually have to ask in order to receive. In episode 384 of the podcast, we'll link to that in the show notes, Tim Baker and I talked about how a majority of hiring managers expect you to negotiate. That's where the offer comes in, expecting that the prospective candidate is going to negotiate. They actually build it into the offers, yet most employees don't even try. Why? Because it's uncomfortable, right? There's a fear of rejection, and we tell ourselves a story that the timing isn't right, or we should just be grateful to have a job. Both things can be true. You can be grateful for the opportunity, you can be grateful for the offer, and you can advocate and negotiate the offer that's given to you. So here's the reality. The raise that you want, the raise that you're desiring, whether it's within the organization you're in or taking a new position, it's almost never going to magically show up in your paycheck, right? You have to speak up. And the key here, the key with the whole negotiation process is authenticity. If you don't fully believe in the value that you bring, if you know you're not performing at the level that warrants the raise, that warrants the ask, they're going to sniff this out instantly. So it has to be authentic. That's step number 1. We have to ask for it. Step number 2 is we have to know and understand what leverage we do or do not have, right? So before you walk into the conversation, you need to know your position. This means 3 different things. Number 1, understanding the market data, right? What are pharmacists with your skill set and experience earning in your area in these types of positions? Now, depending on how specialized the position can be, this might be difficult, or this might be more general information that you could gather on salary sites. You have the data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, or on employment sites like Glassdoor or Indeed, or in other types of resources specific to the profession. Many state associations, like the one here in Ohio, shout out to the Ohio Pharmacists Association, they'll do a salary survey either every year or every other year, right? There's some national survey data. So those are at least a starting point that you can use to understand the market data. The second thing we have to do to know our leverage is know what unique skills and experiences that you bring to the table, right? Sometimes this can be formal types of skills like certifications, whether that's board certification or other certifications, perhaps residency training or other postgraduate training, but also experiences that you have, leadership experiences, management experiences, experiences relevant to the position that you're seeking, with specific examples given for how you've had a positive impact in that role and how that's going to apply to the position, or does apply to the position that you're already in, right? What do you bring to the table? And the third thing is you have to be able to assess your alternatives, right? Do you have other opportunities? Even if you're not planning to leave the organization that you're in, knowing that you have options, knowing that you have potentially flexibility and other opportunities to pursue can have a significant impact, a positive impact on your mindset and the posture in which you're coming to the table for the negotiation. So that's step number 2, know your leverage. Step number 3 is what this show is all about, right? Strengthen your financial position, strengthen your financial foundation. So here's a mindset shift that doesn't get talked enough about when it comes to negotiation. When your finances are in order, right? When you are doing well with your finances, when you're prospering with your financial plan, the various parts of the comprehensive financial plan, you are able to better negotiate from a position of strength, from a position of abundance, rather than a position of scarcity, right? Scarcity. It only makes sense if we're overwhelmed and frustrated and stressed and anxious around our finances because we haven't built that strong foundation. That will impact, whether it's subconscious or consciously impact, our ability to effectively negotiate. So again, if we're desperate for the money or we're in a less than ideal financial position, we might accept less than we're worth or back down at the first sign of any pushback during the negotiation process, which is very normal, right? Offer, counteroffer types of positions. But if you've built a solid financial base, strong emergency fund, manageable debt repayment plan, intentional spending, good savings, or the start of savings towards retirement planning, you can then take your time, evaluate other opportunities if need be. And ultimately, if it's not a good fit, it's not a good fit, right? That's a decision that you can make. So this isn't just about the numbers. It's about the mindset. It's about the confidence. And it's hard to negotiate boldly when you are financially stressed and overwhelmed. So that's step number 3, strengthen your financial foundation, your financial position. Step number 4 is to quantify your value. Generally speaking, pharmacists often undervalue the contributions they're making. Now, I think lots of reasons for this, but I think one of the major reasons for this is that it stems from many of us. Speaking for myself, 2008 grad, been in the profession now for 17, 18 years. Many of us have been growing up in a profession, in a healthcare environment where we're always fighting to just have a seat at the table, right? Another pilot study, fighting for reimbursement, fighting for provider status. We're always fighting to have a seat at the table with other healthcare professionals, with payers, always trying to justify our value. We're constantly trying to prove ourselves. And I think often as a part of that mindset and experience, we often make ourselves small. Now, that's a generalization and not certainly fair to everyone that's listening. My encouragement here is to fight that tendency if it exists and understand and quantify. Not just understand, but quantify the value that you bring. That might be revenue generated, costs avoided, costs saved in your position, efficiency improvements, problems that you solve, projects that you've led, positive outcomes that you've brought for teams, patients, the organization at large, right? This is different for every position, but numbers tell a powerful story. So a vague, hey, I work really hard, right? I've contributed in a positive way to the organization. That's a vague type of statement. That's nowhere near as compelling as something like, hey, I led a change in process or I led a change in workflow that saved the department over 200 hours per year in overtime pay. And that saved costs by X thousands of dollars, right? That's what I'm talking about here with quantifying your value. And finally, step number 5 is use proven negotiation strategies. Now, there's a reason why I have this as the 5th step on the list. I alluded to this earlier, but if we're using negotiation strategies, and I'll talk about a couple here, and we don't have leverage, or we're not operating from a strong financial position, or we haven't quantified our value, or we're not in the right position from a mindset standpoint, these aren't going to feel right. We'll sense intuitively that there's something misaligned. When we feel confident about the value that we bring, when we feel confident about the impact we can have in the organization, when we feel confident about what is fair and we can make that case, then these strategies are really effective. So here are just a few strategies that I have pulled, have used in my own negotiation, have used in coaching other pharmacists through negotiation. These come from the book, Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. Again, just a few, and I want to give you a flavor for how some of these can be implemented. The first one is to deflect early salary questions, right? It's very common in interviews. This is an uncomfortable space that if you're asked about salary or that comes up, whether it's written or verbally, that we want to just divulge information, right? And what we want to do here is avoid anchoring ourselves low. So whenever possible, we want to redirect, deflect this question. We might perhaps say something along the lines of, hey, I'm still learning about the roles and responsibilities. I want to make sure that this is a fair fit on both sides for the organization as well as for myself. I'd love to understand the range that you have budgeted for this position and why that range has been budgeted for the position, right? So what we're doing here is turning back that question to get some more information that will be helpful to us in the negotiation process. So that's the first technique that I would recommend. The next strategy that we want to use is anchoring our salary range, ideally a range, we'll talk about that here in a moment, with precision. So research shows that if you use a precise number instead of a round number, right? So for example, $128,750 versus $125,000, that signals that we've done our homework. Again, we want this to be authentic. I was just talking with a pharmacist last week that had done a great job in terms of salary research, understanding current compensation, including retirement benefits, comparing that against an offer along with that retirement, which allowed to get to a more specific number versus just a general, hey, $130,000, right? So we want to anchor with precision, making sure that we're able to use precise numbers over round numbers. And ideally, we're giving a range here, okay? A range is going to allow us to be able to have some room in that negotiation process. The next thing is we want to think about the whole package and negotiate the entire package, what I call total compensation. So if salary is capped, which we want to first make sure, is that true? Have we negotiated that fairly? But if salary is capped, can we consider other types of things, whether it's flexible scheduling or remote work policies, professional development funds, right? One-time types of funds versus recurring funds, administrative stipends, project carve-outs, right? Are there different things that we could look at and evaluate that would then be impacting the total offer? The next thing is we have to get comfortable embracing silence, right? So after you make your ask, stop talking. Give the space, right? Even that 2 seconds of space I just gave right there was uncomfortable for me. Let the other side respond. Don't nervously fill that space. And then finally, one of the strategies I love from Never Split the Difference is the accusation audit, right? So what we're trying to do here is disarm the other party. So before they can bring up objections, name them. Name the objection. So for example, you may think that this is more than the typical increase or more than the typical ask, but because of X, Y, and Z, here's what I think is fair, right? So you may think this is more than, that's the accusation audit. We're trying to disarm the other party and get towards that point of agreement. And finally, remember that if the answer is no to any one of these things that we're talking about, that's not the end of the conversation. For example, you might ask, hey, what can I do over the next 6 to 12 months that we can get to that number, or whatever is the component of the ask? Can we make a commitment to revisit this in 6 or 12 months because of X, Y, or Z? This helps create some clear expectations and a clear roadmap for the future. So the bottom line is you don't have to be pushy to get paid what you're worth, right? But you do have to be prepared, confident, and you have to be willing to ask. What's the worst thing that can happen, right? You can hear no, and now you're better prepared for the next opportunity, or perhaps even that counter offer within that opportunity. The best that can happen, you walk out with a raise, more confidence, and momentum that you can build upon in your career. So here's your challenge. Within the next 30 days, if you feel like this is right, if you feel like this feels fair, if you feel like this is warranted for the work that you're doing within the organization and that's authentic, schedule a time to talk with your manager about your performance, about your contributions, about your compensation, and think about and prepare in advance using the 5 steps that we talked about in this episode. Practice your ask, practice it again, back it with data, and then go for it. Because your career, your finances, and your future self will thank you.